Like metallic rain falling on a city of neon dreams, our stories are both beautiful and piercingly cold to the touch. Experience the raw intensity of urban drama through a unique and cinematic lens of high-tech art. Click subscribe now and feel every drop of the narrative. The notifications came in at 2:47 inches the morning. I wasn't asleep. I never really sleep well when I'm traveling for work, and that night I was in a hotel room in Denver, staring at the ceiling, running numbers in my head the way I always do when something feels off. My phone lit up on the nightstand, then again, then a third time. I picked it up. It was my smart lock app. Someone had entered my house using the backup keypad code, the one I gave my brother 2 years ago for emergencies. I sat up slowly. I checked the timestamp, 2:43 a.m. I opened the camera app next. The front porch light was on. There were 2 cars in my driveway that I didn't recognize. Through the living room camera, I could see people. Not 1 or 2, at least 8, maybe 10, moving around in my house like they owned it. I put the phone down on the mattress and just sat there for a moment. I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this story. I am not the kind of person who overreacts. I'm a financial analyst. I spend my days looking at data, finding patterns, building cases out of numbers. I don't panic. I document. And the reason I had 4 cameras, a smart lock system, and motion-triggered recording on every entry point of my house was not because I was paranoid. It was because I had learned, slowly and painfully over the past 3 years, that my brother is not someone I can trust. But I had kept giving him chances anyway, because he's my brother, because my mother cries every time there's conflict between us, because it's easier to believe people will change than to accept that they won't. That night in Denver, staring at strangers walking through my living room at 2:43 inches the morning, I finally accepted it. Let me back up. I bought my house 4 years ago. It's a 3-bedroom craftsman in a quiet neighborhood about 20 minutes outside the city. I saved for 6 years to afford the down payment. I was 28 years old, single, and I did it entirely on my own. No help from family, no cosigner, just me, my salary, and a lot of skipped vacations. My brother, I'll call him my brother because that's what he is, biologically is 34. He has never held a job for longer than 18 months. He has a girlfriend named Kara who I have always been polite to, even when she didn't deserve it. Together they have what I can only describe as a lifestyle that significantly exceeds their income, and they have spent years filling that gap with other people's resources. My mother has always made excuses for him. He had a hard time in school. He never got the same opportunities I did. He just needs a little more time to find his footing. I heard some version of this for as long as I can remember. What she never said out loud, but what I understood clearly, was that my success was expected, and his failures were to be absorbed by the family. Meaning me. It started small. $100 here. A borrowed car that came back with a new dent and an empty tank. A loan for a security deposit on an apartment that I never saw repaid. I told myself these were the costs of keeping the peace. I told myself family was worth it. Then I bought the house. The first time my brother asked to use it for a party, I said yes. It was his birthday. I was going to be out of town anyway. I gave him the code, left a list of rules, and came home to 3 broken glasses, a stain on the living room rug, and a back gate left wide open. He apologized. I believed him. The second time, he didn't ask. He just showed up with Kara and a group of their friends on a Saturday afternoon while I was at the grocery store. When I pulled into my own driveway and found my backyard full of strangers holding red cups, he looked at me like I was the one being unreasonable for seeming surprised. You weren't using it, he said. I should have changed the code that day. I know that now. Instead, I had a conversation with him. I explained calmly that this was my house, that he needed to ask before bringing people over, that there were boundaries. He nodded. He agreed. My mother, who he had apparently called before I even finished speaking, texted me that evening to say I was being too rigid and that family doesn't keep score. I changed the code 3 months later, after I found out he had been letting Kara's sister use my spare bedroom while I was on a work trip. I came home to someone else's clothes in my closet and a half-eaten container of my yogurt in the fridge. When I confronted my brother, he said they had nowhere else to go. When I said that wasn't my problem, my mother called me cold. I gave him a new code because she asked me to, because she said he was struggling, because I am apparently incapable of saying no to my own mother, even when every rational part of my brain is screaming at me. That was 18 months ago. In the time since, I had started paying closer attention. Not out of suspicion, I told myself, out of practicality. I upgraded my camera system. I set up motion alerts. I kept a quiet log every time someone accessed my property without telling me dates, times, duration, any details I could capture. It happened more than I want to admit, usually when I was traveling for work, usually involving my brother's car in my driveway. What I didn't know until much later was that it wasn't just parties. The Airbnb listing went up 8 months before that night in Denver. I found it completely by accident. A colleague of mine was looking for a short-term rental in my neighborhood. She was relocating and needed somewhere to stay for a month while her apartment was being finished. She sent me a listing. "Isn't this near you?" she wrote. "Looks like a really nice place." It was my house. Same front porch. Same craftsman trim. Same view from the living room window that I had spent an entire weekend painting the right shade of warm white to make the most of. Listed under a fake name with a description that called it a charming, private retreat. Perfect for groups. $48 a night. Reviews going back 7 months. Guests praising the comfortable beds, the fully stocked kitchen, the welcoming host who was easy to reach. I closed the laptop. I opened it again. I read every single review. There were 22 of them. Some were weekends, some were full weeks. At least twice, someone had stayed for 10 days or more. I did the math in my head, then I opened a spreadsheet and did it properly. Over 7 months, my brother had collected somewhere between $6,000 and $8,000 renting out a house he did not own. A house with my name on the deed, my name on the mortgage, my property taxes, my utilities, which I now understood had been running unusually high for the better part of a year without any explanation I could figure out. I sat with that number for a long time. $6,000 to $8,000. From strangers sleeping in my bed, using my dishes, sitting on my furniture, and every single one of those transactions was documented, timestamped, linked to a profile that, with about 45 minutes of digging, I connected directly to my brother through an email address he had used before, and a phone number I recognized. I didn't call him. I didn't call my mother. I didn't post about it online, or text my friends or do any of the things a person might do when they discover something like this. I opened a new folder on my desktop and I started saving files. I want you to understand the decision I made in that moment, because people always ask me later, why didn't you confront him right away? And the honest answer is this, because I knew my brother. I knew that if I called him, he would deny it, then minimize it, then flip it somehow into being about me. I knew my mother would get involved within the hour. I knew there would be tears and blame, and by the end of the week I would somehow be the villain for going through his things or not trusting family. I had watched this pattern play out my entire life. This time I wanted more than an argument. I wanted something that couldn't be undone with an apology. I called a real estate attorney. I called the Airbnb platform through their official fraud and property misuse channel. I printed every review, every booking date I could identify, every piece of documentation I had collected over the previous 18 months in my access logs. I put it all in a folder and I kept it at work, not at home. And then I waited. I didn't have to wait long. My company sent me to Denver for a week-long conference in March. I told my mother I was going, the way I normally would. I did not tell my brother directly, but I knew my mother would mention it. She always does. She thinks keeping everyone informed is the same as keeping everyone connected. I set up a secondary alert on my camera system, one that would send clips directly to a cloud folder instead of just notifying my phone. I made sure my front door's smart lock had its activity log synced and backed up, and then I flew to Denver and I waited. By the third night, there was a new booking on the listing. I found it by checking the page from a private browser. 2 nights, starting that Thursday. The review the guests would eventually leave described it as great location, very responsive host. I called the attorney from my hotel room. Then I called the non-emergency police line for my city and explained the situation clearly and calmly. I told them I owned a property. I told them someone was allowing unauthorized occupants access without my knowledge or consent. I told them I had documentation, timestamps, camera footage, and a digital log of every access event. The officer I spoke to told me to call back when I was on site and ready to proceed. I rebooked my return flight for Thursday morning instead of Saturday. I did not tell anyone. I landed at 11:15. I took a rideshare straight to my house rather than my own car, because I didn't want my car in the driveway to signal anything before I was ready. I walked around to my neighbor's house. I had called her from Denver and explained the situation. And she is the kind of neighbor who has been watching out for me since I moved in, and I watched my own front door from her kitchen window. At 1:00 p.m., a couple arrived with rolling luggage. My brother met them at the door. He walked them inside. He was holding what looked like a printed sheet of house instructions. I called the non-emergency line again. Then I opened my laptop and I did something I had been waiting months to do. I logged into my smart home system, which was still in my name, still connected to my account, still fully under my administrative control, and I changed the access code. I also remotely locked the back door and the side gate. I left the front door accessible from the inside, because I needed people to be able to exit safely, but I shut down every other way, in or out. Then I waited for the police. They arrived 14 minutes later. 2 officers. I met them outside and walked them through the documentation I had printed and organized in a folder. The deed, the mortgage statement showing my name, the Airbnb listing screenshots with dates and reviews, the access logs from my smart lock system, and a spreadsheet summarizing the timeline. One of the officers flipped through it slowly, then looked up at me and said, "This is thorough." "I'm an analyst," I said. "It's what I do." We walked to the front door together. I unlocked it with my phone. My brother was in the kitchen. The guests were in the living room. Kara was not there that day. When my brother saw me, the expression on his face went through about 4 different versions of itself in under 2 seconds. Surprise, confusion, a flash of something that might have been fear, and then, remarkably, the face he always makes when he's about to try to talk his way out of something. Calm, reasonable, ready to reframe. He didn't get the chance to use it. The officers asked him to explain his relationship to the property. He said he was the owner's brother, and he was managing it for me. One of the officers looked at me. I shook my head once. The officer asked if he had a written property management agreement. My brother said we had a verbal understanding. I told the officers I had no such understanding, and showed them the deed again. The guests were asked to wait in the living room. They were confused and clearly embarrassed, and I felt genuinely bad for them. They were just people who thought they were booking a legitimate rental. They had nothing to do with this. My brother tried to explain. He said he was helping me cover the mortgage while I was away. He said he had been meaning to tell me. He said it got out of hand, but his intentions were good. He looked at me when he said this last part, and there was something in his eyes that I think was a genuine request, not an apology exactly, but a plea for me to absorb this, the way I had absorbed everything else. I didn't say anything. I let the officers do their job. He was cited for trespassing and unlawful commercial use of a residential property. The Airbnb account was flagged. I had already submitted a formal fraud report, and the platform subsequently deactivated the listing and suspended the account. The guests were refunded through the platform's protection policy, which I had confirmed in advance with Airbnb's trust and safety team before any of this happened. My brother called me from outside after. The officers were still finishing paperwork. He said he needed to talk to me. I told him we could talk through our attorneys. My mother called 20 minutes later. I let it go to voicemail. Her message said she couldn't believe I had involved the police. She said I had humiliated the family. She said this isn't who we are. She said she hoped I was proud of myself. I listened to it once. Then I saved it to the same cloud folder as everything else, dated and labeled, and I went inside my house. It smelled like someone else's shampoo and a candle I didn't own. There was a used coffee cup on my counter and a throw pillow on the floor that I didn't recognize. My spare bedroom had fresh linens on the bed, not mine, and a small card on the pillow that said, "Welcome. Enjoy your stay." I stood in the middle of my own home, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not anger, exactly. Not relief either. Something closer to clarity. The kind that comes when you stop pretending something isn't true. I opened every window. I changed every access code. I removed my brother from every shared system he had ever been added to, including the streaming account my mother had always used as a reason I needed to stay connected. I texted my mother back, not a call, a text, because I needed it in writing, and I said that I was not going to discuss what happened until she was prepared to acknowledge that what my brother did was wrong, not complicated, not a misunderstanding, wrong. She didn't respond for 4 days. The attorney I had hired filed a civil claim for the rental income my brother had collected. The amount, once fully documented, came to just over $7,000. I was not doing it for the money, though I won't pretend the money didn't matter. I was doing it because I needed there to be a record, something he couldn't explain away at the next family dinner, something my mother couldn't soften with the right framing. My brother hired his own attorney, which told me everything I needed to know about how seriously he was taking it. There were negotiations. There was a settlement. I'm not going to share the specific terms because they're confidential, but I will say that it was resolved in a way that I found adequate, and that my brother is no longer in possession of any access code, key, or method of entry to my property. My mother eventually called again. She said she had thought about it and she understood that what my brother did was not appropriate. She did not say it was wrong. She did not say she was proud of me for handling it. She said she hoped we could all move forward, and that she was heartbroken about the distance between us. I told her I loved her. I told her I needed boundaries to be respected for me to feel safe in a relationship, including with family. I told her that moving forward wasn't something that could happen on a timeline she set, and that I would reach out when I was ready. Then I made myself a cup of coffee in my own kitchen, in my own house, with nobody else's belongings anywhere in sight, and I sat at my own table, and I just existed there for a while, quietly, without owing anyone anything. People ask me sometimes what the hardest part was. They expect me to say it was the confrontation, or the legal process, or finding out about the Airbnb in the first place. It wasn't any of those things. The hardest part was the years before all of it, the years of telling myself that being accommodating was the same as being kind, the years of absorbing small betrayals because calling them what they were felt like too high a price to pay. The hardest part was unlearning the idea that keeping the peace was my responsibility, and that someone taking advantage of me was something I somehow had to manage around rather than stop. I own my house. My name is on the deed. It was mine the day I bought it, and it is still mine now, and nobody gets to walk through that door without my permission. Not guests. Not my brother. Not anyone. I changed the locks. I kept the receipts. And the next time someone tells you that enforcing your own boundaries against family is something you should feel guilty about, I hope you remember that you are allowed to protect what you built. Every single piece of it. Even from the people who were supposed to have your back.